Hello everyone, nice to be here again tonight. I'm Rev Jim Smith and this video is the third in the series on the towers, and it's coming from the United Kingdom from my office here in Sussex. We've been looking at the towers, and tonight's video is called What is Intercession? What is it that we are to do inside the towers? How do we intercede inside the towers? Last week, on the last video, we looked extensively at life inside the towers. How do we intercede? What pattern can we use? I get asked this a lot, and I've decided to add this into our video series tonight. One thing to understand at the very outset is that prayer and intercession are slightly different. Prayer, the Greek word proseucho, is our Father prayer. It's what the Lord taught us to pray, and we pray every day, every hour, every minute, making our needs known to the Lord, and He's happy we should do that. Some groups seem to think that that's what intercession is. It's just a lot of that list and shouted very loudly. Nothing could be further from the truth. The writer to the Hebrews says this: "Therefore, Jesus is able to save completely those who come to God through him, because he always lives to intercede for them." And the word there is enchikeno. It's not proseuche. And enchikeno, it means an intimate relationship with the Lord. Unlike proseucho prayer, intercession is a way of life. It is a way of walking with the Lord in such a way that we are totally intimate with him, we feel his heart, and we learn how to plead into that heart. And it is an experience that goes on day and night, anywhere, everywhere. This intimate relationship with the Lord continues all the time. It's costly, but it's very rewarding. That's the two sides of intercession. The cost is very high. The reward of being close to the Lord is truly incredible. How then do we exercise this way of life? How do we live this way of life? What is the Bible teaching on this way of life? I think for me, the best biblical example is of course Jesus, but Hannah gives us a lot of insights into how we are to behave. And I've taught this many times, and you'll find it coming up again and again in the Tower's intercessory writings. Hannah, 1 Samuel 1, was married to Elkanah, who also had another wife, Peninnah. And Peninnah could have children, but Hannah could not have children. And this caused a lot of nastiness between Peninnah and Hannah. And Hannah was very upset and cried a lot about this. And Elkanah says to her, because he's a good man, he says, "Hannah, why do you cry? Am I not worth more to you than 10 sons?" Well, he didn't understand his wife, because the truth is Hannah wanted a child and nothing else was going to satisfy her. So, like all good intercessors, she goes to a place where she can pray. I don't know where you go. I tend to just sit here in my office. But sometimes I go up into the hills, or I go to a church building, or I'll go to a cafe. I have various places where I can sort things out with the Lord. And for Hannah, she went down to the temple. And she was praying, and we read this: "In her deep anguish, Hannah prayed to the Lord, weeping bitterly." And intercession comes at a very deep level and quite a painful level. In her deep anguish, Hannah prayed to the Lord. Most intercessors, I've met many over the years, over the decades in different countries, those that are truly walking this path are usually deeply troubled. Many intercessors I have met quite a lot, as I've travelled to 60 or 70 countries over 55 years of ministry. Most of them have had a breaking experience in their lives. And that's what helps them intercede at a very deep level. For me, it was the loss of my son, a baby who died. And that was the point at which my intercessory life began. It's a strange thing, but in our brokenness, we are able to intercede before the Lord for the broken world in which we live. Strange, isn't it? It almost seems as though until you are passing through some terrible situation or have, you can't really intercede. Odd that, isn't it? And she was weeping bitterly. Well, intercessors cry a lot. I do. You do. We all do. Intercession is an emotional experience, not an intellectual one. I'll mention that in a little while. I watch the time carefully, as you know, because a lot of people watch this in Africa where the internet is expensive. So I keep it strictly to 30 minutes. So that's why I keep checking on the time for their sake. A lot of intercessors cry. It seems to be the mark of our calling. We are often in deep anguish and we are weeping before the Lord, crying before the Lord. And why? Because that's what he's doing. If he is able to save completely those who come to God through him because he always lives to intercede for them, then there's a great sorrow and pain there at the brokenness and the damage of so much of his creation. And I think he weeps tears before the Father deeply, and we must do the same. If you've entered the path of intercession, it won't be long before you find this out. I've been to many meetings that claim to be intercessory but are really shout loud meetings. I think intercession is a deeply emotional inner experience, which mostly we do on our own. You remember the Desert Fathers? If you've never read about them, put it in your browser. They went out into the desert. They looked for a place where they could be alone, where they could intercede before the Lord from their hearts and pray from their hearts, from their emotions. And intercession is that they really set the pattern for us. That was the 3rd century, and they set the pattern. It is like that. It doesn't tend to be a great victory march. Funnily enough, it tends to be deeply troubled, weeping bitterly, crying before the Lord. The intercessors are the advance guard of the Lord's army. And the advance guard, that in the UK would be the SAS, go out into no man's land, do things and come back. No one knows they've done them. They don't triumph or rejoice, to just go and do things. And it seems to me that intercessors are like that. We go into the dark places and we weep before the Lord, deeply distressed, and we do what we do, and then we move on. True intercessors are often hidden, hard to find them, because we are quietly getting on with our calling, and we've learned that mostly we are on our own, and we are deeply distressed. We are in deep anguish before the Lord. So that's when you ask me what is intercession, it's enchikano, it's being intimate with the Lord, and it's being in deep anguish and crying before him. And Hannah was urged on in her intercession by her desperate, broken heart. I believe that is the engine of intercession, often is our broken heart. I don't often speak too much about myself, but I do think that the loss of my son, I didn't realize it at the time, became the engine of my intercession, as it were, to put it rather bluntly. That is what helped me be deeply distressed before the Lord and feel his distress and his pain in his intercession to the Father. Not very popular, this, by the way. In the 21st century church, we've gone for rah-rah, praise, praise, love, love. I love all those things. I really do. But in the process of love and joy and rejoicing, let's be careful we don't lose sight of the other side of things, which is the deep distress. of intercession. Taught this all over the world. Not very popular. The only thing I can say, and maybe this is a bit arrogant, but this is Hannah's experience. And she's a great intercessor. And if you look into Gethsemane, we haven't got time tonight to do too much, but you see much the same thing. She is urged on. What happens to her is that the religious establishment moves against her. It's Eli, he says, stop your drinking. Don't stop this drink. You shouldn't come to the temple drunk. You should go home. Intercession often runs into trouble from the establishment, from the established church, from the leaderships and the pastors. I don't know why, but it does seem to be the case. I've met a number of intercessors who have been told by their pastors to stop doing what they're doing. And I've never understood why. Why would you not want somebody moving in the Spirit in this way? I've no idea. All I can say is it's more common than I'd like to believe. Eli, you think about it, was the most senior religious figure in Israel, and he couldn't tell the difference between deep distress and alcohol. It's poor, isn't it? Mind you, he was a poor character, as we would see if we went on in 1 Samuel. But I'd say he's a picture of what I've seen many times. Some pastors are jealous because they are not intercessors. I can't imagine why. Who'd be jealous of a calling like this that is so painful? I don't know. Maybe they're jealous. Maybe they fear that we'll see things in them and in their lives. That's a prophet's job, not an intercessor's job. That's my main calling. Prophet. I see into the hearts of many of these pastors, and they're frightened by what I might see. But intercessors aren't like that. We're not looking to men. I'm not looking to do anything. I'm only looking to kneel before the Lord and say, can I share your pain? Can I share your struggle? And really I don't think that should affect any leader, but you will find as you go on, this is common, your friends, what's this rubbish you're talking about? All this suffering, all this pain, rubbish. The faith is all about victory and triumph. That's the prosperity gospel. Everything is wonderful, marvellous, glorious. I haven't the time tonight to speak about it, but that is non-biblical. Everything will only be all right when the Lord returns. Until then, we're going to have to live with some of the shambles. And some of these churches seem to be telling me that the second coming has come already. Anyway, that's another story. But you see, it affects intercession because we are struggling with the sorrows of the Lord in the world, in the spiritual world. So we know only too well that the second coming hasn't happened. So we know, intercessors know, everything's not all right and everything isn't going to be all right, and that we're going to have to struggle in the midst of all this. I don't know. In her deep anguish, it has to come from the heart. The religious establishment will at best tolerate us, and at worst. Angela of Foligno, which is in Italy, went into the Basilica of St. Francis, looked at the pictures there of the Lord's sufferings, and fell on the ground crying in agony at what she saw. And they threw her out because she was causing a disturbance. Eli would have agreed with them. So he makes this statement. And now she says, not so, my lord, she said, I have not been drinking. I am a woman who is deeply troubled. Yep, well, we've got that one, Hannah. And then she adds this, and for me, she is the star intercessor of the Old Testament. Though Moses is great, and of course the Lord is supreme, but she is so wonderful. Listen to what she says. She says, not so, my lord, I have not been drinking. And then she says this, I am pouring out my soul to the Lord. I am pouring out my soul to the Lord. I would say that is the best summary of intercession I've ever read. And I have this picture. I use it a lot when I'm teaching. Imagine we're in the desert and you've got a glass of water and you're nearly dead. And instead of drinking it, you pour it on the ground and it all gets lost. That's what Hannah was doing. She was pouring out her soul. It was her very life's blood she was pouring into this intercession. She was dragging up everything of her spirit and pouring it out before the Lord. Absolutely right. I'd say that is intercession. Pouring out her soul before the Lord. And that's costly. A very costly process. Deeply distressed and in anguish and crying. Yep, that really is the kind of framework of, for me, intercession in the towers. But the heart of it, pouring out my soul before the Lord. Pouring everything out before him. Some intercessors in the past have died in that process. They've given so much, there's nothing left. And I'd say that's absolutely right. Moses said that. Lord, if you're not going to forgive them, take my life so that they may be forgiven and I'll bear the burden. That's intercession. We pour out our soul before the Lord. We give it all and we hold nothing back. That for me is true intercession, is pure intercession. You see, it couldn't be further from our Father. I mean, I prayed our Father today. I mean, I was at the find me a space in the car park prayer today. I got one. And other things. That's lovely. I love all that. Of course we do. It's what we've been told to do by the Lord. But do not, please, assume that that's intercession. What happens is people who step into the intercessory environment and try praying the Our Father prayers jolly soon disappear because they find the storm of the enemy's opposition too much for them. And there is a lot of storm in the intercessory environment because, I don't know if you've thought about this, the one thing the enemy fears above all else is intercession because we are able to move the heart of God. He remembers Mitzpah, 1 Samuel 6. When they poured out the sacrifice before the Lord and the Philistines were broken. He fears intercession. It moves God's heart to act, so he opposes it violently. That's just how it is. And if anybody comes into this space believing that our Father will do it, I'm afraid it won't be long before you will be blown away. And even experienced intercessors struggle to hang in here because the storm can be so strong. I read this week of some mountaineers that climbed up Everest. That's the tallest mountain in the world. I'm sure you know that. And when they got to near the top, the wind was so strong, it blew them off the mountain, blew them to their death. And the enemy is blowing that strong against intercession. And sometimes we can only hang on by our fingertips as we intercede before the Lord. Tough environment. But the potential. Look at Mitzpah. Israel returned to the Lord and defeated the Philistines. That's the result of intercession. Wonderful. And that's why I keep going. Because I do believe that the results of intercession will far outweigh the struggle. And remember, we've been intercessing for thousands of years, and some of the results we see today are from the intercessors of the past who prayed and fought, and the battle they fought, we've seen the victory now. Because remember, the kingdom is timeless. So we're living in some of the victories of the past, and we are fighting for some of the victories in the future. I find that thrilling to think I'm part of that. And so I keep going. And I find in intercession, I find the person God made me to be. When I'm in the intercessory space, I feel a fullness of who I am inside of me that nothing else gives me. So that's just, we've only got 10 minutes left. So I have to be brief on these videos, but you can read a lot more of this on unshakabletowers.org. There's a lot of material already and more coming all the time as I try to share some of these things at a little more depth. Somebody asked me, what pattern do you use? Me. What's my pattern of intercession? And I thought, yes, that is a good thing to share with you tonight. I'm sorry, tonight. You might watch it in the morning, but for me, it's tonight. What is the pattern that I use? Well, this is the one I've evolved. It works for me. It might work for you. You might find your own. I don't know. But here it is. This is what I do. First, I leave all my burdens and requests at the door of the space where I'm going to intercede. I leave all my Our Father needs at the door. I don't take them in with me. At the moment, as some of you know, we're praying for my wife's health. I don't take that into the intercessory space with me. We're praying for our upcoming visit to Africa. I don't bring that into the intercessory space with me. Got to have some work done on the house. I'm not bringing that. I bring none of that stuff. I leave it at the door. I imagine they're like suitcases and I put them down and I leave them there. I can pick them up on the way out. Because if you take those in with you, they'll get in the way. We're not going to ask for personal needs. We're going to intercede. We're going to pour out our soul before the Lord and see what he has to say to us, or not, as the case may be. That's the first thing I do, and I've always done that. I did it tonight before I came on to you, because I run 2 or 3 ministries and a church. I have a lot on my mind, but I put it all to one side so I could speak clearly tonight. I do that always. Secondly, I have learned in the intercessory space to control my brain. Now, before you wonder what I mean by that, this is what happens. The brain, a wonderful instrument, but it has no spiritual content. Spirit speaks to spirit in the intercessory space, and the brain has no part to play. It's very useful afterwards for analysing what you've thought and felt. It's good before in preparation, but it's no good in the space. This is what happens. Because it's analog, it can only do one thing at a time, though it does a million. So what happens is you get these things. I wrote them down here. You didn't lock the car. You forgot to order the bread. Where are your glasses? Did you lock the back door? What time's that phone call coming in? All this stuff will keep coming in from your brain, which is trying to work out what you're doing sitting here, doing nothing. You've got all these things to do. And this is how I deal with it. I let them all run through because, they've got to sort of fizzle through it. I know what's happening. I let them fizz through my brain. And then after a few minutes, it will calm down. And this is what I say. You may think this is foolish, but it's what I do. I say this: brain, you are wonderful. I need you so much, but I don't need you now. So I wonder if you would just go backwards in my head and run my body for me while I seek my Lord. And you may think, well, that is actually foolish. Maybe it is, but it works. I have found then that all the distractions that the brain wants to throw at me stop. It's almost as though we've come to an agreement. Okay, you're going to do that spiritual thing stuff, which I don't know anything about. So I'll leave you alone. I'll keep your heart going, your lungs and stuff, I think, breathing, and I'll do all that. And then when you finish doing that spiritual thing, we can exist together. And that's what I do. And you may think that is foolish. Maybe it is. But I've found a way of stopping all the Our Father stuff running through my mind. I've left it at the door. Now I've got to stop my brain bringing it back into me. That's what I do. I found it very effective and gives me a freedom from all those things. And as soon as I finish doing that spiritual thing, they'll all come back to me. The third thing I do, there's only 4 things. That's the first is leave my suitcases at the door. The second is get control of my wonderful brain and tell it to go and do its thing and leave me alone. Spirit speaks to spirit. The brain's got no part to play in that. Then I think about the cross. It's not a big thing. I don't make a big thing of it, but I do think about the cross. I just think about it. I don't know what your favourite song is. When I survey the wondrous cross, I think about that. I think about my value on the cross. I think about the Lord's love. Anything. Just to focus my spirit on the one thing that will help me move into the intercessory space. And after that few minutes, then I say, Father, I am here. I have come. I have no right to be here and I have no right to stay, but by the blood of Jesus, I can stay. And I'm ready now to intercede. And what am I trying to do? Well, the Lord is interceding all the time to the Father. And I try to get into that space where he's interceding and flow in it. Now, it's easier to say, it's easier to experience and say. I don't just look for my own stream, I want to swim in his. So, Lord, you're interceding to the Father. What's in your heart? And I kind of move into that. And then after that, it can go anywhere, anyway. And anything can happen. But I'm within the stream of his intercessory flow. I don't find that difficult, but of course, I've been 4 minutes to go. I've been doing that for years, and it might seem strange at first. If I could put it very sort of foolishly, I want to get in on his call with the Father. I want to get into that flow rather than ring the Father myself. I think that keeps intercession God-focused, and the danger, of course, is it becomes me-focused. This is me praying. And then once I always know when that's happened, and then it goes where it goes. And does it go on long? Well, if you read the intercessors of the past of the 14th, 15th, 16th, 17th centuries, they could go on for days, but I can't sustain it. I just can't. It's such hard work. And I don't tend to intercede for very long, hour, maybe, specifically. Of course, as it's a way of life, I'm interceding all the time as I move around. But if I'm setting aside a specific time, I personally can't stay too long because this is why. The human spirit was never designed to bear these spiritual burdens. And so my body gets weary. And so I don't tend to have long periods. Others do. I admire them. It's great. But my understanding is it's a way of life going on all the time. I'm just setting aside a specific time to pray. Hope that helps us as we move forward in our intercession. Next week we're going to look inside the blazing fire tower and look how it works. This is the framework in which we have to intercede. We're going to look at that together next week. So that's where we are. At the moment, videos 1 and 2 are available on our YouTube page, which is how you've got to this, I assume, tonight. And video 3, this one, will be up by tomorrow. So we are slowly working our way through this series. Next time, inside Blazing Fire Tower. And I hope you have found this helpful tonight. Thank you to David very much for directing this as he's doing so from a town about 20 miles away right now, helping us to make sure the internet works. We do appreciate it very much indeed, David. We couldn't do it without you, and we're all grateful. Thanks, everybody. Bye.